Go same way. Slightly less aggressive rear tire. And you really feel like get out of the way. That back tire is just like, oh, I'll get on top of that. You want to go ledgy side, which is the left side. Right side, you can kind of see there's a nice straight through there, but I prefer the ledges personally. I think it feels pretty good. Oh! That back tire just kind of disappeared from me there. That's okay. You can certainly feel the high pivots. That axle path, the back wheel wants to just set itself on top of ledges, which of course we have lots of. But it also feels heavy in comparison to this. Trade-offs. Trade-offs, trade-offs, trade-offs. Popping into high massa here. The very first part. The monsoons last summer definitely made this worse. Whoa. And it's a little all over the place. Little all over the place. Going on through, we made it. All right, start a high massa on the Druid. Let's see what 130 mils of high pivot does through here. That longer wheelbase just feels smoother, a little more predictable. So I've got both bikes set up at 30% sag. And right now, the Druid, despite being the less fancy shock, is softer. Feels like it has better small bump compliance, despite having 20 millimeters less travel. Oh, subjective. But I got a very sensitive butt. This section, I would say this is like maybe the next hardest part of the high massa climb. Yeah. Right through there. And then this next one, because it is a blue climb after all, right? Like, it's not supposed to be that hard. Yeah. Oh yeah. Lots of traction. It's slippy, but not too bad. Ledge. Alright, same ledgy line on the Sentinel. Front wheel comes up easier. Oh, maybe that was me, maybe that was the bike. Front wheel lift. Ooh. I think what it feels like is that the Sentinel has a shorter rear end, and because of that the front wheel comes up easier in those wheel lifts. But right now I think I'm used to a real long rear center and I'm getting a little squirrely. So not necessarily a bad thing, but a characteristic I'm not used to riding at the moment, and it's taking me a second to get used to it. So we'll go fourth. Oh no! Darn it! I did the hard parts! You did! It is stuck. Same gear. I think we're in the same gear. Feels like the same gear. Oh man! Despite having worse line choice, it probably felt a little better on this bike. All right, we're we're basically at the top of middle Ahab, about to go down. I'm going to talk a little bit about climbing characteristics. Very different bikes, different rear center lengths, just very different feels, even though I think they're kind of in the same wheelhouse of what they're used for, or who would want to buy them. The Druid feels stable and low, and it has a ton of traction. I think for the ledgy Moab stuff, the axle path, you really can feel it get out of the way. So when you're having those square edge hits, that back tire moves away from it and sets on top of it. I think it's a little bit better suited for seated climbing and just you having a consistent cadence as long as you can time your pedal strokes, because everything these days has super low bottom brackets. Whereas the Sentinel feels lighter, feels snappier. It doesn't feel like it has the same amount of just raw traction that the Druid does, despite having, you know, what would be considered a little more aggressive tire and more travel. But it does feel lighter, it feels more nimble. It feels like if you are the type of person who stands and sprints, that bike might feel a little more suited for you, whereas the Druid, again, is that more like planted, consistent cadence, seated climber. That thing is so impressive. 130 mil bike, you know? It's like when you get on a 150 bike and it feels like that, you're like, alright, that's kind of the way a 150 bike should feel. When you get on a 130 bike, something in your head is just like, shouldn't feel this good. It's still really good. I don't know what's making noise back there. That noise makes me think that it's rougher, but feeling it through my hands and my feet, it still does it extremely well. No rim impacts, gets off the ground well. I do feel like it doesn't want to hold the line quite in the same way. That Druid felt like more composed, and I think I was going about the same speed, but the Druid felt slower. you know, if we're comparing price and we're comparing build kits, they're pretty much in that same $6,000-ish category. On that, I think more money is going to your drivetrain. On this, more money is going to your suspension. I personally don't have any problems with XT. I think it shifts great. I still like manual shifting. Transmission is awesome. It's durable. It works well. You got to remember a battery. So maybe for my money, I would prefer to have a little more tunable, higher end suspension, but that is, I would say, the big difference is nicer drivetrain, nicer suspension. In general, actually, I think they're kind of in the same category regardless of travel, because when we move on to descending, they're both very competent descenders. Again, the Sentinel likes being off the ground. It feels a little more playful. It feels a little lighter and, you know, a little snappier, a little more flickable. The Druid feels stable, planted, very good small bump compliance. Alright, so if we're getting a race bike, or we're just trying to have the fastest lap time, both up and down, probably about the same speed, but I think they're honestly really comparable. I think if you have Moab terrain, you got a lot of ledges and you got a lot of square edge hits and techie terrain, the Druid is going to be a faster and more comfortable bike, if only because it is more comfortable in that harsh terrain. If you're on smoother, bermier terrain, the Sentinel is probably going to be faster because it does feel like it has a slightly more supportive pedaling platform.